Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Loadout, presented by The Daily Dot. That's capital T, capital D, capital D, as it always is. I am always your host, Jared Wynn, bringing you one more night of esports news, discussion, debate, diatribes, and so on and so forth. Hope you are ready for all the esportsing that we have here for you. We have a lot of it, let me tell you. A big CSGO event going down over the weekend. We're going to discuss that in just a bit. Plus, a somewhat unexpected roster movement that just came down across the newswire. We'll get all of that to you in just the glorious way that only we can do. And by we, I mean myself and the one, the only Sir Richard Lewis, recovering from his devastating bout of land plague. Richard, how goes the fight?
Well, I'm fighting it in the old tried and tested method of start drinking. But of course, last time we did that, I got super sick for like a month. But it's really frustrating because I just got over a bout of tonsillitis, and now I've got a throat infection, which was brought over to Valencia by Fifth Lauren. Anders hosted it, and then me and Anders, we do like to kiss and cuddle at events in our bear way. And
it gets lonely, yeah, it gets lonely, you know.
It definitely gets lonely, you know. Anders has just had a kid. You know, he's a bit starved of attention right now.
Right.
So
get a few drinks in you and just,
Yeah, needs must, as the devil drives, as they say. So,
right.
It's my own fault, no sympathy. But you buy the ticket, you take the ride.
All right. Once again, we blame Lauren for the problem the entire team takes on, as we should. I mean, that's just he's gotten used to it. I'm sure he can take the flack at this point. Who else could do it better than Fifth Lauren? Really, no one that I'm aware of. Let's get right into things before we go too off on that tangent. Not that we ever go off on tangents here on the Loadout. A big bit of news coming down the wire just recently here today. Titan and Envious making an official roster swap. Not just a change, a swap. That means with Kenny S and Apex going to Envy, Shocks and Smiths doing the unthinkable, going to Titan, rejoining their former taskmaster, the one, the only Existence. Surely a move that will pay off for years to come for these players involved in it. Now, we've talked before about the Envy move with Kenny S and Apex coming over and the potential this lineup has if they kind of get their shit together, which remains to be seen, but they have great potential, certainly the big P word coming into play here. We didn't talk much about Titan with Shocks and Smiths because we both dismissed it out of hand, saying there's no way. Like, this has been done multiple times before, and each of those times it has failed miserably. Surely not. Surely they won't go down this road again. Surely Shocks will find some other team to play for, perhaps Kingwin, perhaps anyone besides Titan. But no, he has done the official French roster swap movement and just gone to the other team, along with Smiths. Smiths staying in the game for a while longer, it seems. They join Existence, RPK, and Maniac, who, by the way, for what it's worth, has said that he has moved on from his full-time job, and he's going to become a full-time CSGO player with this lineup. We'll see if that makes any impact, hopefully, for the team. It will. Richard, unexpected, certainly, to have Shocks and Smiths go to rejoin Existence, especially Shocks. For those who don't know, Shocks and Existence have a rocky past together. Have multiple blow-ups in the past. Is there any reason? They talked about, they said the right things. They talked about being older and wiser and so on and so forth. Any reason for us to realistically think this is going to last and work out?
Well, first of all, to that point, I've been here before. I've been here in Source. I've been here in CSGO. I've seen that same statement from Shocks in the past. In fact, had I had a bit more time before the show, I would have linked and read the last time that exact same statement was made. Obviously, with the news literally just coming out before we started doing prep, it's a little bit hard, but trust me, it's out there. They've played together before, and Existence has said the same thing. We've all grown up. We can all get along. Yeah, it's never going to work. It's never going to work practically. So looking at the roster, it's definitely a great acquisition for Titan. If RPK can hit his level and Shocks can continue to operate at the level we know he can, you've got two of the best riflers in your country, no doubt about it. On top of that, Smiths is Mr. Consistent. Maniac's playing at a much elevated level to his skill set. And you've got Existence, great in-game leader. But here's the problem. Existence is a playbook in Game Leader. He wants everybody doing everything the way he envisions it at any given time. And Shocks will never conform to that standard, ever. So someone's going to have to compromise. And if it's Shocks that has to compromise, he's going to be out the door sooner rather than later. If it's Existence, he's probably going to start thinking, why am I even here? And if it becomes apparent that he's not pulling his weight on the server and not pulling his weight as a tactician, it's only a matter of time before Shocks and Smiths maybe try and manufacture pushing him out for a change. So who knows? I also want to say, if there's ever any doubt that Shocks and Smiths is one of the strongest bromances in esports, this removes it. Because Shocks, and I know this, could have been sitting pretty at Kingwin on something like 5,000, maybe even higher euros a month. But because Smiths wouldn't have been going with him, he has chosen to go to Titan. So him and his best friend in real life can play together, which is a phenomenal gesture on his part, because people might say, oh, well, Kingwin just had that good result. They wouldn't kick anyone most teams would kick someone to accommodate Shocks, let alone Kingwin. So, incredible gesture on his part, especially to play with a team leader that he hasn't worked with before. The sad reality is, I don't think this improves Titan overall. I think they definitely get a bit more of the wow factor with Shocks in there. But in terms of AWPing, all due respect to Edwards, I think Smiths is a downgrade from Kenny S. And I also, Shocks is now going to have to become an entry fragger again. They're going to need that. He can definitely do that, but once you start putting Shocks in the box, bad things happen. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this Titan lineup. I need to see them in a few tournaments. I guess they're at rock bottom at the moment. So the only way is up, but I think it's a project doomed to failure ultimately.
Right. It's hard to imagine them doing much worse than they have as of late. They've basically become like a second tier at best team. And that's just been their fate as of late. So I don't think bringing in Shocks and Smiths fresh could do worse than that. It might be cataclysmic. We'll see. I don't see that happening. I guess the question we have to ask here is, because you mentioned Kingwin performing well as of late, that would seem an even more attractive prospect now, given their performance and the money they would be able to offer. Is it just a matter that this was the only availability that Shocks and Smiths had together, like they had to go to Titan? Is that what they had to do? It feels like that. I don't see why else they would make this decision, frankly.
Yeah, I think for me, it's quite simple. Shocks has all the options, Smiths doesn't. And if you're really good friends with someone, look, it's very similar to the Hiko and Skadoodle thing that was going on in North America.
Right.
Hiko was like, we're a package deal, we're bros, and then Cloud9 were like, okay, how much? How? Here's your 10 pieces of silver, Skadoodle. Let's do this thing. I'm sure that's how Hiko sees it. Actually, all joking aside, it was the sensible thing to do for Skadoodle. And had Hiko had a bit of foresight about him, and perhaps even a bit more humility, dare I say it, I think he would have took the option. And it's hilarious in their case that Hiko wanted to go to a team that was capable of winning things, didn't think it could be Cloud9, didn't think it could be a Cloud9 with nothing, and then just made 3 finals in a row. But we'll talk about that later in the show.
We will.
Certainly, I think, Shocks is the guy that has all the options. He's the superstar. Smiths is criminally underappreciated in a lot of ways. He's consistent. He's a model pro. You never hear any controversies from him at all. He's a great professional, but he's just not that flamboyant an AWPer. He's always been overshadowed by other people in his region, even when you have to go right back actually to the Very Games era to really in CSS. I mean, to really find his high points. And that isn't to say he's a bad player. He's versatile. He's consistent. All of those things, but ultimately, Kenny S is a spectacular X Factor player. So Smiths doesn't have the same sort of options. Now, as a package deal, you would say, all right, maybe I'm not too comfortable taking on Smiths, but if I get to Shocks, I definitely do it. But unfortunately, the way things are, that just wasn't practical, especially if you speak only French. Your options are super limited. So basically, this looks like their loyalty to each other is stronger than their desire to, or certainly Shocks' desire to get the best deal, get the best financial deal, whatever it is. So Titan really was the only place they could go as a pairing. What I thought was going to happen was I thought this would be the opportunity where, you know, Richard would say to Edwards, look, man, we've played together all these years, you know I love you, but I can make a shit ton of money over here. And I'm pretty sure they did have that conversation. And again, what a testament to true friendship. I'm you know, amazed. I am agog that this has happened.
Yeah, we'll see if it sticks this way. There was a time when there were 3 options for top French teams, but a few bans took care of that rather swiftly, actually. We no longer have three competitive French professional teams, unless you count LDLC White, but I can't quite see Shocks and Smiths going to LDLC White for all of their minor successes they have had.
No, that would be a ridiculous a ridiculous idea. I mean, you know, you can only go so far down the trough. That would have been a massive come down for
right.
both of those players. But this has always been the problem with the French scene. They've always had 2, or rather enough players to make 2 really good teams.
Right.
Always. It's always been about 10 amazing French players. You can take the best 5 and you can make one better than the other. And indeed, this is what happened. It became Very Games in Source, whereas when KRL was out of Very Games, he made a team called Nameless. I think Nameless were the only team to beat Very Games in a final in their entire Source history. And he did, I think KRL did it with him, RPK, who briefly left Very Games, I think. Source. It's a long time ago. A lot of land plague since then, so my brain cells probably aren't firing. But anyway, the point is they've always had that talent pool. And this is what always happens. Every year it's the same story. French make a team. They become the world number 1. They start to degrade. They start to bicker. They start to infight. They start looking over at the other French team, which is about the world number 4, 5, you know, usually. And then they say, what if we took the 2 guys we used to argue with from there, pretended all our differences were settled, brought them in, and kicked the 2 we're having trouble with now? Let's do that. So they do it. They go there. They say we're the best. They say we're definitely the best. That team becomes number 1. Cycle starts again. Rinse, repeat. That's the French scene in a nutshell for anyone that's followed it for more than a year.
Yeah, the potential problem now is that we don't have number 1 and number 5 out of France. We have number 4 or 5 and number, I don't even know where Titan falls in a ranking at this point. So it does worry me a little bit to see this happening. I'm not so sold on Titan's success, especially. I know you're high on Envy. I want to see it before I commit to Envy as a potential contender. I want to see Apex and Kenny S play well with the team.
If history's going to repeat itself, Jared, I'll tell you this now. Envious are going to be amazing for like the next 2 months. Right? Like unbeatable, unplayable. And then the cracks are going to start again and they're going to degrade and they're going to go down, and then over the next 2 months there's going to be rumors, and then, you know, ultimately whatever happens between that incredible 2-month period where they're godlike and they're beating everyone to the not so godlike period to the clearly troubled period paves the way for the return of Shocks.
Right.
You know, and we end up back where we were. That's, you know, that's probably is what's going to happen. I certainly hope 1 year from now or whenever it is, someone's found a recording of this clip and is showing it off to everyone saying, wow, isn't Richard Lewis prescient?
Well, these should be preserved for all time, so that should be an option. I don't see any problem with that happening. You mentioned the comparison actually to Hiko and Skadoodle. I feel a bit bad. I guess I shouldn't feel bad for Hiko. I think he made a poor decision in the way he handled that, because I think he's shown himself. You watched him be a 5th man who couldn't communicate with Flipside Tactics. He's shown himself to have great world-class skill still. But he made, I think, a pretty poor decision in judging the skill of potential teammates. And because of that, he put himself at Nihilum. All credit to Nihilum. They've done better than I thought they would, honestly. But they're not quite where Cloud9 are now. Not quite. Not quite there. So I think he has to be looking in his rearview mirror and saying, wow, I misjudged that situation a little bit. Just a tad.
American teams and all-American players could learn a real lesson from Virtus Pro, because that team have so many beefs and divisions, and it's always been that way. And yet they've managed to win a major. They've always managed to be competitive. Yeah, they didn't look great when they were getting 16-0 by Kingwin.
Right.
But for the most part, that Virtus Pro side, which is a cauldron of negative emotions and arguments and tensions, when it comes to game time, they just treat it like a job. It's like, look, we've got to work with each other.
They're pros.
We're
they're
the best 5 Polish players.
Yeah, they're pros.
We've got to. And they just get it done. If more North American players had that sort of attitude, their scene would be a lot stronger.
I think a lot of players internationally could take on the attitude of being a professional, and it would benefit them and their teams significantly. And perhaps in time, we'll see more of that as we kind of drift towards more of a professional scene from the semi-professional kind of catch-as-catch-can scene we've had for some time in Counter-Strike and in most of esports, really.
Yeah.
That's Envy, that's Titan. We'll see. These lineups are now set. We'll see what happens with them. We'll see if they're still in the same form or fashion in 2 months. We're not going to put any bets on that, personally, especially with Titan, but we'll see. Moving on now to the Face It final. You were there to see this in person, Richard. Team Solo, we'll start with them, TSM. They made a triumphant return, to say the very least, beating NiP, Fnatic, Na'Vi, and Cloud9 in one run. That's a pretty impressive slate of victories to pick up for a team that's had some inconsistent practice time. My big takeaway was Cajun I don't think he gets enough credit as a world-class player, and he is not just a world-class player, but you can't put many people atop of him. Maybe you can put them on his level right now, but I don't think many players go atop him. I think, in general, TSM doesn't get enough credit, actually, for how skilled they are. Even with the credit they do get, I think they deserve that much more, and I think they showed this with their performance at the Face It final because, again, they haven't had the preparation, the practice that they usually have. So for them to come in and play this well against these teams, I think speaks tremendously to how they fit together and, again, their individual abilities. What was your impression of TSM's run through these teams?
I mean, look, what can you say about TSM? I've been saying it for a while. It's something me and Thorin go back and forth about. I said for the longest period of time that there's a real argument for TSM to be the #1 team. They prove it consistently in their ability to beat Fnatic. Now, something was wrong with Fnatic at this event. But again, TSM were able to beat them in a best-of-1. And TSM have shown that if they've won, I think it's like 4 out of the last 5 events they've attended. That right there is world #1 form for me. So I think they're an incredible team. I think they got an embarrassing, shockingly good array of talent. Carrigan is the best, in-game leader in terms of being able to nurture talent and get the best out of his players that I probably have ever seen. Definitely in CS:GO, and I think overall, he's took players that, I always knew Cajun B was good, for example. I've said this a lot. Cajun B's problem was he never wanted to settle down with the team. He could never be bothered with it. So in Source, he was really good. He'd have these amazing games. He'd be like, wow, this could be like one of the world's best players. But then it would get 2-3 months into being in Copenhagen Wolves or, insert Danish team name here. And he'd be like, I'm going to go do national service. I'm going to join the army. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Blah, blah, blah. He'd just leave. And you'd be like, okay. Well, I guess that's the end of Cajun B. Then 6 to 8 weeks later, he's back, wanting to start up again. Now, because of this wanderlust, or whatever you want to call it, he never, ever really had the opportunity to show how good a player he was. And even when he came into CS:GO, and even when he joined TSM, he was, or the other team that was TSM, or would become TSM, he was still, I would say, not even really the X factor on the team, not even really the standout player. I think a lot of people would have pointed at Device, Now he is ridiculous. And it's just been about being able to knuckle down, put in that application, put in those hours. And he's not even a young guy. He is in real life terms, but not in CS terms, not compared to that team. And yet, once again, Carrigan has helped him settle, relax, find his groove. And he was ridiculous at this tournament. Like, unilaterally, the MVP for TSM in the final, especially. Just a ridiculous player. Ridiculously good. So for me, TSM right now, they're going to take some beating. Fnatic looked mortal at this event. They lost to Cloud9. That's unprecedented. JW was playing poorly, below his usual godlike standards. A lot of speculation about, he's had offers from NIP, which is true. He absolutely has had those offers. Lots of infighting in Fnatic, lots of rage when they lost to TSM. Flusher smashed his keyboard down. So Fnatic could be on the downward slope of the dynasty. Who knows? I won't get too carried away. It's only one event they haven't won, but the signs aren't good. The omens aren't good. So who is even close to TSM right now? That's a question. Anyone's welcome to answer it.
It's pretty tough. I think Fnatic is the closest you can get. I guess the next thing to talk about is Cloud9, actually. You mentioned TSM winning 4 out of 5. Cloud9 has now made 3 consecutive finals. That's not a bad run for a team that prior to that had not really done much of anything. And over those 3 consecutive finals they've put together a nice string of wins on their own. I think here they beat, who was it? Kingwin, Navi, and Fnatic, including a best of win over Fnatic, a very impressive and decisive one. A strong first map, and then being clutch in overtime against the team. A really, really impressive run from them. It's hard to see them now not as a contender at any event they go to. I mean, this was a stacked field, and they looked very much the part of the contender. They also won 14-16 against TSM in the first map, slipped up in the second map. But, I mean, they were there, and we've seen this now 3 weeks in a row. Against Fnatic, they were there in the final. They had a good exchange with them. Against Navi, they were right there in the final. Could have come up with a win. They've been on the edge of winning 3 events in a row, basically. Now, on the edge doesn't mean anything. It's, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, that old saying. But still, very impressive from them. Much, much more than I expected, even in the most optimistic take I could give on the team. And here they are.
I'll tell you something about Cloud9. They won't mind. We were pounding tequila shots together at the after party, and as I always do, right? This is a rule that I live my life by. Even if it's the truth, if I've got to say something bad about people, if I see them at a party or in a bar, I always buy them a drink just to say, look, it's not personal. That Richard Lewis the guy and Sean Gares the guy, we can have a drink. But, when it comes to Richard Lewis, the analyst, the pundit, and Sean Gares, the player, the in-game leader, we might not always see eye to eye. One might be saying bad things about the other. That's just how it is. So anyway, we had a long talk about it. And I think the thing about Cloud9 was, right, so when they weren't very good, when they put this new lineup together, they were failing to get out the group stages at Gfinity, and me and Thorin were being really critical of them, and rightly so, because they've got all of these resources at their disposal. They've got the potential to be a real contender globally. They're the best team in NA. We were like, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. And because we said that, they used to really be upset at us. Really. Like Sean Gares he just stopped talking to me. Like we'd walk past each other at events. He'd blank me flat out. Because he was that pissed off at what we were saying, which was a fair comment. The last Gfinity, where they underperformed again, we weren't even talking about them in particularly negative tones. They were in the bar, and you know what it's like. You see nothing. He's a cheeky little chap. He'll talk to anyone. Absolute legend of a guy. And he came over, and of course the other team were there. And it always gets a bit salty, a bit sour. Like I think they feel people are out to get them. They feel a bit put upon. And and it was the same thing. And they said to us, they were like, man, you're way too harsh on us. And again, in general, in the media, that's not true, actually. Everybody likes to really speak big of Cloud9 because that's a sensible thing to do from a monetary perspective. We want to grow the North American market. So that's why when you have the ESL ESCA final, no one was talking about Fnatic. Not even on the broadcast. They were talking about Cloud9.
Right.
So the idea that there's this prejudice against them is absurd. The evidence speaks for itself. But anyway, they said, judge us at the end of our European run. So hard. If we fail, trash talk us then. And I said, don't you worry. If you fail, I certainly will. We left it there. Anyway, with all the events that have gone on now, it was ESL, ESCA, ESWC, and now, of course, Face It Finals at DreamHack Valencia. There's no doubt their improvement is ridiculous. They are easily in the top 5 teams on current form in the world, for me. They have some individual performers that would fit into almost any team in Europe, Skadoodle especially. And they have proven the doubters wrong, but only in the sense, if we were to now say something bad about them, we'd be wrong. We were right at the time we said it.
Right.
It doesn't vindicate the poor performances of 3 months ago. But I can admit the improvement is night and day. So, yeah, people do need to take them seriously. They are incredibly focused right now. I think that feeling that people were attacking them unfairly helped galvanize them. They managed to come through ignoring all of that Adderall scandal with Semphis. It just didn't faze them, didn't rock them at all. And they've earned well, they already had my respect, but they've increased it as competitors. They have really shown that they are worthy of being talked about in the same breath as a top European team. It's just undoubtable at this point.
Yeah, the results speak for themselves and how close they've come. It is unfortunate for the team, of course, they came so close each time and yet didn't quite make it. They remind me, in a way, and it's kind of a funny comparison, of NIP in the Michael era, where they were the constant second-place team, the constant runners-up. The difference being NIP was trending down at that time, whereas Cloud9 is trending sharply up. I mean, they have, in the space of a month, I can't remember a team that's taken this big of a jump up in the space of a few weeks. I mean, they lost badly at Gfinity, and the very next event they were at, within 2 weeks, they were contenders and contenders from there on out. It's hard even to imagine what happens, what takes place in the team that has this big of a jump. I think it actually speaks to the fact that at the top level of CSGO these days, the margin between the very best teams and the next level of teams below them is smaller than you might immediately think it is. There's little things that separate those teams that end up making a big difference. One of those things being a player just playing out of his mind. Skadoodle, you mentioned him specifically. He is, in my mind, as good as any op user is today. And his form has just been incredible the past few weeks. I don't think there's anyone who fits above him. I wouldn't put him above everyone else. I think Guardian's right there with him. Actually, I'm not sure who beyond Guardian I'd put there with him.
Well, put it this way, on current form, I would put him tied with Guardian.
Right.
I hope nobody think that's hyperbole, not an over-exaggeration, but I genuinely think with JW's form having took a little dip, Kenny S is obviously struggling for confidence right now. All of a sudden, we're running out of big names, and Skadoodle, in the meantime, has proven you can put him on any bomb site in the game as a CT, and he can hold it by himself. He's proven he can consistently get entry picks. He's proven he can consistently top frag with the AWP, and on top of that, make ridiculous just individual shots that few AWPers can.
Yeah, he can hold the 1 versus 3 bomb site as a terrorist, for example, and just win it just because he snaps, and that's it. What are you going to do? You can't do anything against that kind of play. That's the scary play when you're against that, when you can't do anything against an opper who's just like, he's going to look at you and you're dead. That's it.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I don't think it's all just about Skadoodle improving. I think Guardian has taken a little bit of a, not a slump, that's too strong a word, but he's not been up to his usual high standards. He certainly wasn't in Valencia anyway. Not in the crunch games. So, all things told, I think Skadula, Shroud, as always,
Of course.
impresses me. But like I said, this is the unsung hero. I said it on the broadcast. I'll repeat it here. The change in nothing is ultimately like Shroud and Skadoodle are world-class players, right? Shroud probably still does have a lot to learn in terms of team dynamic and how to play the broader metagame of CS. But when it comes to just individual aim and being able to frag, he's a world-class player. There's no doubt about it. Skadoodle, we've already said, one of the best AWPers in the world. He's up there with a very elite few. But nothing had been the dead weight on that team for so long, would maybe have one really standout game every 10 or so. That's not good enough at this level. But just recently, his form has been insane. The way nothing has been playing has been so good. And like I say, a team is only as strong as its weakest link. Well, nothing went from being that weakest link to being an integral part of the Cloud9 machine. And he deserves way more credit than he's going to get. This is the problem with stats-focused analysis or people only looking at kills. I said this with Freakazoid. Freakazoid, he was bottom of the frag charts a lot of the maps that they played, a lot of the halves that they played. Now, that people will go, oh, he's so bad. But it's the type of kill he gets. On the rounds he gets a kill, Cloud9 invariably wins because it's the first kill of the round. So entry fraggers, their stats are always misleading. But there's nothing misleading about the improvement in Nothing's performance. It's absolutely incredible. When a lot of people were saying he was washed up at 24, it's hard to believe he's only 24, actually.
It is. He's been around for a long time. He's one of the veterans of the scene.
Well, yeah. But, it's great to see. Because he's, like I say, he's like a really nice guy, awesome person. He's been under loads of pressure. He was like the lightning rod of the team for the longest time. And the last 3 tournaments they played, he's been sick. So I'm real happy for them. And like I say, it's his improvement for me. That's the real talking part about Cloud9.
Yeah, you mentioned Shroud still learning to better play the metagame. I think Freakazoid still has a lot of adjusting to do to being on the stage again. He's still only recently returned to the professional scene, really the competitive scene at all. He was just playing EA pugs for the longest time. So this team, I think, still has improvement to come, which is a scary thought considering their form of late. We'll see if they can take them to an actual tournament win. That is the next step. And perhaps even major contention, which is the next step after that. We'll see.
I still think it's a big ask. I still think it's a big ask for Cloud9 to win something. But given how strong the scene is overall, there's no shame in being second. The final point I wanted to make before we move on is,
Sure.
Do you remember all that talk about Cloud9 and how if they had a house in Europe and we speculated about what they could do? Well, they've just had effectively an intense boot camp in Europe, playing European teams regularly, in tournament environment and tournament conditions, practicing with them. Look what it's done for them. They need to get that European house, and they can go to the next level for me.
They perhaps can. I want to actually get off on a tangent on purpose here, because we didn't have a chance to talk about this, you and I. I talked about this with Sam Lingle. You mentioned the little Adderall thing that came up. And Simphus mentioned that Cloud9 was on Adderall at a previous major. I believe it was Katowice that he mentioned this was about. Sam and I, as you have, Richard, have been in the scene for a long time, and this was no surprise to either of us. We talked about how we used to go to events a decade ago, and we would see teams go to the bathroom together to get ready for a match, and they weren't washing their hands. They probably washed their hands afterwards, but they weren't going in there to just have a piss together. They were preparing for the match, let's say. It's just a part of the scene, and it has been for so long, and I think as attention grows and the money obviously increases, it's going to be more of an issue. We've only just gotten to a point where we actually bother to check USB devices and check mice and keyboards and not allow people to bring flash drives and put them into their computer. So it's a big ask to check for drug use now. It's a pretty big jump, I think, from where we just got a few months ago. But what's your view on this and how it's perceived now, and just that people looking at it like it's a new thing. Again, as I mentioned, it's been a part of the scene, what you expect for over a decade.
I mean, look, you're never gonna. Okay, so first of all, just because certain performance-enhancing substances are deemed to be against the rules of fair competition in mainstream sports, we're under absolutely no obligation to adopt similar policies for similar substances. We're absolutely not, by the way. Anyone who says that we are is an idiot. I would ask them to tell me why. So, with that said, do we want to have an idea that about performance enhancing drugs in esports? Do we want it to be a thing? Do we want it to be an issue? Are we saying that taking a substance that may or may not give you an advantage, and let's be clear, if the NA scene is the one that's most rife with Adderall, hasn't done a lot for them, has it?
Right.
Right. So just throwing that out there. But anyway, I said I encountered Adderall and primarily actually beta blocker use in StarCraft. A lot of the high-level Korean pros used to take beta blockers so they didn't get stage nerves. And that's true. And that's out there. But yet, despite the fact that these have all been known, everybody knows it's going on, there's no practical way to police it. There just isn't. Not unless we're going to say, stage one, yes, we believe that certain drugs give people unfair advantages over those people that don't use those drugs. So that's stage one. Collectively, as an industry, we need to agree to that. If we agree to that, we move to stage two. And stage two is we need to decide which drugs are performance enhancing and therefore we should be testing for. Now, that's going to vary in itself. But, okay, let's presume Adderall's going to be on that list. So then stage three. Who is going to undertake the testing? In fact, actually, before we even get to that, stage three would probably need to be is which tournaments are going to risk not having teams attend because they say we're going to take your urine and test you. Keep in mind, it's a young industry. It's a competitive industry. If one tournament says, hey, come to MLG, there's no drug tests here, and you're ESL and you're going, we offer the same prize fund, but we're going to take your piss. These are just examples. If you're a player that likes to use Adderall or anything else that may or may not be on that list from phase two, why would you want to go to that one when you can just go to that one? So there's that. So then stage four, who's going to take the tests? Physically, it would have to be an independent body capable of the logistics of sending testers to every tournament in the world, capable of doing random tests outside of competition.
Right. And we should be clear talking about this. This is something that mature and rich sports industries and bodies still struggle to implement, is independent testing like this, much less esports where it is now.
Yes, exactly. You look at athletics, they've got football, NFL, still got doping problems with resources that will always, as far as I see it, well, certainly in my lifetime, eclipse esports. So we end up in this position where, even if there was an independent body, let's just say ESL and MLG and DreamHack, GFINI and everyone else, they all pick up the phone and they rang up one of the independent sports bodies that were doing drugs testing for an existing sport and said, do you want to do esports as well? They're going to go, yeah. Where's the money at? And then someone's going to be like, fuck, we got to pay these guys. Testing ain't free. They ain't just going to do it out of altruistic reasons.
Right. For those who don't know, it's very costly, in fact, to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course it is.
It's expensive.
Hugely costly. You just think about the practicalities. First of all, when you take tests, I know a little bit about this. I used to do sports coaching, and so when you take a test, you take multiple samples. You run the extensive tests. It's not just putting a bit of litmus paper in. These are the extensive tests for a list of chemicals. So you can imagine when you're breaking down urine into sort of its constituent components, these are quite advanced scientific methods we're using. So then you've got that. Obviously, it has to be observed. It has to be like what they call in police, like a chain of custody. You have to observe the person producing the sample. So that's somebody whose time is being there. They need a second independent witness. The sample then has to be transported in a controlled environment so it cannot be tainted to a laboratory where a scientist then does the testing under witnesses again. So you're paying for everyone's time, you're paying for the science, you're paying for the test. Then if there's a positive, one of the other samples that were also taken is then subject to secondary testing. So this is a pretty big, it's a mammoth undertaking. Costs a fortune. And who's going to foot the bill? Like, just for the kudos, you know? It's, does it come out of the tournament money? Does it come out of the Valve drops for the majors? Where's it coming from, this cash? We can't even get a player union together. We need to do that before we really start trying to nail on the whole drugs testing thing.
And they would have to agree to it, by the way, the players in the union they would form, potentially. So, I mean, this is the complexity here is so beyond what esports, the industry, currently has to offer. It just is, in every facet, in every way. And I also wanted to clear up, because I think I've seen this sentiment before, I have seen it online, after the comments were made, people being shocked. If you have watched esports events in the past, say, 13, 15 years, you have seen players play on drugs often. Yes. And that's just the way it is. This is not a new thing that you just saw because Simfa said it. This has been a thing you've watched every time.
I have seen, and again, if what I'm being told is to be believed and the mannerisms and behaviors that I'm observing are to be believed, I've seen League of Legends players on cocaine or amphetamines during broadcasts. I mean, I've had that story brought to me on a number of occasions about a number of players. I'm not interested in publishing it, frankly. I'm a drug use advocate in the sense that I believe, the old I think it was John Stuart Mill, over your body you are the sole sovereign. That's what I believe, and I don't want to scandalize someone for making life choices. And again, this is the other point, isn't it? Performance enhancing, recreational. When it gets to a point where you can make an argument that in esports, cocaine, which wouldn't be considered a performance enhancing drug in a lot of circumstances, certainly in sporting circumstances, it would probably, for a lot of the things we do in esports, would have some performance enhancing properties.
Journalism, for example, would help, I think.
Yes.
A good line.
Well, just over a long LAN tournament.
Exactly.
On the final day when you've been playing for 12 hours, a few bumps probably is going to give you an edge over the team that have had, an energy drink.
And you get some delays in there, hey, not a bad way to keep up.
So, I would never go down that road of publishing it. Never. And I'm not here to scandalize players. It's ridiculous. If you fix a match, yes. If you cheat, yes. I'm there. What you do in your own free time, Richard Lewis doesn't care about.
I guess the question there, Richard, is does it give you a competitive advantage? And if it does, over a player who chooses not to imbibe that, is it then on that player to take the drug to catch up with that advantage, or is it on the organizer or the whatever body to even that out? I guess that then becomes a question.
Well, again, you're absolutely right. It is problematic in that sense. There's definitely culture where it's like, it got to the stage in Halo and MLG where it was like, as soon as Adderall got embedded in that scene, and I spoke with ex-Halo pros, and I spoke with the fixers, even people that would fix the Adderall, people who even said to me on when we were doing, I did an interview. I was going to write an article about this about 18 months ago, and I never got around to finishing it. Some of the fixers, they said, I only went to MLG to sell Adderall. It was just too profitable not to go, right? That's what they said. So when you get to that stage, obviously it's like, well, fuck it. I'm going to have to take it as well. If I don't, there's no way I can win. You create that myth in your mind.
Right.
But ultimately, it's not like there aren't policies in place. By the way, that's the thing everyone forgets. Does clearly say in ESL rules you can't play after you've had a beer. Technically,
poor Envy.
Yeah, well, yeah. Where do we draw the line with that? Can you play with a hangover?
Half the French scene fucked just by the rule of ESL.
But this is what I mean. So according to ESL, you can't even play under the influence, drunk. Well, I definitely got some bad news for you about that.
Can you cast under the influence, Richard?
Well, again, yeah, I've seen that as well in my time.
Right.
So they've got a policy there. There's a policy that MLG have. It's already in place. They already say it's wrong. It's just how do you police it? You can't. You can't without an independent drug testing body and the buy-in, the permission of the teams that attend those events. If you don't have those things, then this practically cannot work.
And a lot of money. A lot of money.
Like, millions. You are literally talking millions to get this up and running and to have it run effectively across all tournaments worldwide. And last time I checked, we're doing pretty good in esports, but we're not doing that good that we can effectively dump millions into something that is ultimately bottling players' piss. We're not there yet. I don't think we ever will be. I don't know if we need to be.
Yeah, and we're, of course, as you mentioned before, where does the line get drawn? Do we then go into HGH testing for esports athletes who are trying to heal that wrist injury more quickly than they otherwise could? Do we get into testing for substances that might not help? Like I have on good authority, there are a number of players who might have played in different events under the influence of weed, of marijuana. Is that something we have to test for?
Yeah. Do we test for that?
Should we? I mean, again, it's a very complex and very expensive issue. So to act
on the one hand, it slows reaction time. That's well known.
Right.
On the other hand, it eases nerves. I mean, I've known numerous pros down the years that have sworn blind, which is ironic given that it helps glaucoma, that I play better stoned. They all say it to me. I play better stoned. I'm like, really? Do you though? Yeah, I do. I'm like, all I want to do is just sit there and like watch a film or whatever. Fuck playing games.
Yeah, I don't want to point out names, but I mean, I'll say some of the greatest and the most legendary players, biggest names in Counter-Strike history, the old days of Counter-Strike, some of them, multiple of them, a number of them, in fact, played every single event they went to, high out of their minds. That was a part of the ritual, was to go to the hotel room and with a few of your friends and just light up, and then you go play. Some of the biggest names we had in Counter-Strike, that was just a ritual for them. Where's the line drawn? I have no idea. Where does the money come from if you do draw the line?
And that's the other thing, Jared, man. We really... look, gaming as it is under siege from external forces that want to subvert gaming and continue with this pussification of the internet, right? And I'm not cool with that. And I don't want to have this tiny little gap with which the fucking morality police can get involved. I don't want the morality police telling players that all of a sudden you can't smoke a joint, you can't have a beer. Like, no. Society needs to go the other way. We've been lucky. We've avoided most of that in gaming. Yeah, it shouldn't happen. So I really, that's why I'm nervous about it. Ultimately, I detest the morality police, the body morality police coming in and telling you what you can and can't do. So,
and one more point, actually, if you're going to ban all these drugs, do you then ban Red Bull and Monster energy drinks? Like, what's the line you draw there?
Well, there's zero chance of that happening, because if you were to take away energy drinks the industry loses a significant chunk of its funding.
Yeah.
And that would just never happen. In fact, it's quite interesting actually, because there's this assumption that energy drinks are kind of universally accepted as just being okay. And actually, there's numerous countries that have legislature in place, government-approved legislature, about the use and distribution and sale of energy drinks. None of them have particularly strong esports presences. Isn't that interesting? So, yeah, I'm not saying energy drinks are bad. That would make me a hypocrite, because I'm talking about how it's okay if you want to do a few bumps. That's fine with Richard. But the point is, you could make an argument that a lot of the things that are in energy drinks are performance enhancing in esports terms. In fact, actually, that's their selling point, that they enhance your performance. That's why we tell you to drink them. So, again, the hypocrisy is real. I just think we should just leave it well alone for now. Let's build a sustainable industry. Let's build an ecosystem that actually works. Let's just build that first, because we failed to do that for 15 years. Let's build that, then we can talk about all these extraneous things. That's what I believe.
I'm sure that we will talk about those things once we get there. And I hope we get there. I hope we can have these conversations, because that would require us to get there. And that's great if we can get to the point where this is a realistic conversation to have. But for now, we are not quite there where the resources are available to us and we have the opportunity to really have and implement this kind of thing. A bit of a far ways off. So if you don't like the idea of players being high on something or having some influence on them, just put it out of mind, if you will. Forget about it, because that's the only way that's the only way it's going away, is if you pretend it's going away. So the part of esports as it exists today, and it will be for the foreseeable future. Thanks as always to Richard, the one, the only Sir Richard Lewis, for joining us. Stick around. We're going to have an hour of League of Legends discussion to follow after this great Counter-Strike and drugs discussion. Talk about the weekend in LCS, both in North America and in Europe, and look ahead to next coming weekend. We'll have some interviews from Evo, actually, on the screen while we switch out talents. Thanks once again to Richard. And again, follow the channel and stick around.
Make sure you do. See you, Jared.